that. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Summer Bach, and I wanted to talk about all of the extra produce that you have because, you know, everybody admit it, you've been fear buying. And I know that, you know, food waste is a huge problem. I mean, I hate to say that, but if food waste basically was a country, it would be third behind US and China in terms of greenhouse emissions. So it's a really big problem for our world in terms of like actually affecting climate change and doing all these really bad things. So I want you to really think about all this produce that you bought. I don't want it to go bad. A third of the food that is produced goes bad. And there are millions and millions of people starving all over the world. So let's just take a little bit of action right here, right now, and figure out how you can preserve this produce so that it can last longer over the coming months. And you're not going to be out of the money you spent, and you're not going to be making the world a worse place. And you're not going to be making me mad, because every time I went to the store to get garlic, it was out of stock for quite some time. All right, so let's get started. First and foremost, we are going to make some fermented veggies. This is a natural process. We're not going to use any vinegar. We're just going to use salt and vegetables, and we're going to put it inside a jar, and I'm going to show you how to ferment it. It's a really easy process. It's super fun to do with kids. It's going to be a really fun thing for you guys to do while you're hanging out at home over the next however long. So please let me show you how to do this. So I've washed this cabbage, and I'm just going to take off a few outer leaves, and I'm going to chop it into, let's see, I need a sharper knife. I did notice that the other day. I'm actually going to shred it as fine as I can. It's really up to you. There's no general rule for how big it needs to be, but the one consideration I would make is that you want this to be all like every bit of vegetable material that you put in this bowl, you're going to want it to be about the same size. All right, so I'm just going to start with shredding, and it's going to make some chopping noises. So let's get this over with. I mean, and if you have produce right now in your fridge, go get it. Let's do this together. I am going to use a cabbage, an onion, a little bit of grapefruit, an apple, and some carrot. It's going to be very simple. There's a lot of different recipes that you can use. You can actually just throw stuff together. You can experiment. You can try it out. The first few times people make fermented veggies, sometimes they don't get it right. It is possible that it might fail. So if it fails, don't feel bad. All right, I want to get this chopped because I don't know if you can hear me at the same time that I'm chopping. All right, let's do just a little bit more. A little bit more, because I'm going to fill up this jar. You would be amazed how much vegetable matter you can get in one jar. Like, it's insane. Okay, I'm just going to stop there for now. All right, so we have cabbage in the bowl. Now, what I want to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of salt. As you can see here, I'm not using a recipe, and I think that's really important. I want you to think about how you could experiment and do this without a recipe, because you might not have everything needed for the recipe. So let's put some things together and use our taste buds as a way to figure out what we're going to make, right? So start with some sort of base. Cabbage is the best base. I like it because it has a lot of water, and so it's going to create a nice brine. It also has a nice flavor, and you can use, I think of making, fermented vegetables, I think of it as building a salad. Cabbage is the lettuce, and you start adding all the other little, I don't know, I guess like seasonings or, accoutrement. You're going to add parsley, maybe you'll add apple, maybe you'll add walnut, like all these other things that you add to a salad to build the salad up. You want that to not be more than the lettuce. You're not going to put more walnuts than lettuce. So think about that in terms of ratios. I think that's going to help you make a really yummy fermented vegetable. Now, okay, haven't mentioned this yet, but this is really important. What we're making, we're going to make this with just salt, and that's going to create this brine, and we're going to stuff it in this jar. It's going to go in an anaerobic environment, meaning there's no oxygen that's going to be present underneath that layer of brine. And what starts happening at that point is actually quite magical. That's when you get all of the probiotics that naturally live on this cabbage, that live maybe on your hands, on your skin. They're going to start multiplying and growing and starting to create lactic acid, which makes it taste sour. It also preserves it. That lactic acid is a natural preservative, and that's what makes it last for months, even years. I mean, I've eaten sauerkraut that was like 2 years old. It was totally fine. It's amazing how long this lasts. This is one of the oldest forms of preservation. This is what people did before they had refrigeration. And we didn't realize there was a probiotic benefit back then, but people were making it because they needed a way to get through the winter without their vegetables rotting, and they needed those vegetables desperately because they provided nutrients like vitamin C, prevented people from getting scurvy. So this is super, super cool that like they discovered it as a way of preserving. And then we find out hundreds of years later, maybe thousands of years later, actually, that there are living organisms that are doing that. And so they produce this lactic acid, they release carbon dioxide, which is what makes it bubble. It's just so cool. And they multiply and they grow. And then when you eat them, it's like putting fertilizer on your gut microbiome. So for people who've taken antibiotics, this is it. They say 70 to 90%. I think there's some discussion out there. 70 to 90% of your immune system lives in your gut. So why wouldn't you want to be supporting your gut right now? Okay, onion time. I'm probably going to cry. Probably have to go wash my hands during part of this. I love onions and kraut. Now, onions are prebiotic. They have a lot of inulin in them, which actually helps. So for people who this is your first time, I highly recommend adding onion. It helps to make sure that ferment goes well. It kickstarts all of the probiotics into high gear, and it gives them food that only they eat. So that's the cool thing about prebiotics. It feeds the good guys, but it doesn't feed anybody else. Like no one else can eat in that bacterial world. No one else can eat the prebiotics. Okay. I'm just going to put a half onion in, and I'm kind of going to see. So I'm just eyeballing this, and I'm like, you know what? I want more onion. Like, I think it will taste better with more onion. And you'll get to this point. When you practice doing this, you'll know so much more how it's going to turn out. I'm going to give you a couple more tips to make sure that it turns out well in just a few minutes. Here come the tears. Okay. All right, so what's happening over here in this bowl, in case you can't see, which you probably can't because you're thousands of miles away, is that the salt that I added to this is starting to make all of the cabbage glisten. So it's starting to look really nice and shiny, which is pulling the moisture out. All right, I'm crying now. I'm gonna go wash my hands. I'll be right back. Wow, I really hope that onion chills out, because that is some strong stuff. All right, so onions in, cabbage in. Let's do carrot next. Carrot is such a delicious addition to fermented vegetables. Carrot just has this nice sweet flavor. It helps counteract the sour very nicely. And I'm just going to peel the carrot, and then I'm going to grate it. And that's just, to me, that's how I like it. You could also do carrot coins if you wanted. I'm just going to grate it right now. So you might be wondering, like, okay, I'm going to put all of this vegetable matter inside this jar, and it's going to sit for how long? Like, what are the next steps? So I'll tell you right now while we're doing some of this vegetable prep. What you're going to do is you're going to let this sit in the jar for about, probably, I would say 1 to 4 weeks. And during that time, you're going to want to taste it a little bit every day and see how it's doing. You're going to want to go in there and push the brine down. And once you've let it sit on your counter or in a cupboard or in a pantry, you know, for the allotted amount of time, and it gets as sour as you want it to, it'll just keep getting more sour every day. As soon as you taste it and you're like, okay, I don't want it any more sour, like that's perfect, then you're going to take it and you're going to put it in the fridge, or you can take it out of this jar and put it in another jar with a lid. I'll put it straight in the fridge from this jar. That's why I love these. And then it will last in the fridge for a very long time. It's really cool. All right, let's grate these carrots. I will say the one nice thing about all of this is I have no FOMO. So I can just sit at home and do all the things I want to do, and I'm not missing out because nothing's going on. You guys get to see my great grating skills. Okay, so there's that. And then, let's see, we're just gonna stop with that. I could add more. It's not half bad though. I do like that. All right, next up, I'm going to add some apple. Now you can use any kind of apple. I may even suggest Granny Smith. It's one of my favorites for fermenting. So you could add a Granny Smith if you want. I'm only gonna do about half of the apple. And this is an Envy apple. So you could use Honeycrisp, Gala, anything that you want. But I do think that Granny Smith might be the best, but I don't eat Granny Smith. And so I'm really just using all of the produce that I eat. Like this is the stuff that I have sitting here at my house that I don't want to go bad. So that's what I'm thinking about here. So use what you have. All right. Not much, but just enough. Just get some of that apple in there. It gives it a little bit of flavor. If you put too much fruit, that can be a problem. So you don't want to go too crazy with the fruit. It does attract mold. So we're not going to go too much there. And then my final ingredient here is going to be a little bit of grapefruit juice. Unusual. This is a very unusual addition. I need a strainer. 1 second. All right. I have to clean up a little bit. It drives me crazy. Okay. All right, I can think now. I'm not doing any more cutting, so let me move this out of the way. Okay, good deal. So much nicer. Okay, so now I'm just gonna add not much here. I'm just gonna squeeze a little bit of the juice from the grapefruit. I just don't wanna get the seeds in there. This is just gonna bring a different flavor. Another great addition, which I don't currently have, is caraway seeds. And I'm actually probably gonna go get some from Scott's house and put them in later. So I'll show you this process, and then when you see it in the end, it's probably gonna have caraway seeds in it because I'm gonna sneak them in. You could also add pepper, you could add other spices. whatever you think would taste good with this. You could add thyme, cumin. I mean, the possibilities are endless. So this is a really important part of the process, and I want you to just pay close attention here. So do you see, like, look at the glistening. Like, look at how the vegetables are starting to get totally wet. That's all the salt pulling the moisture out of each cell inside of the vegetables. So all that moisture is coming out, and that's going to make our brine. And at this point, I'm kind of going to just massage the vegetables. I'm just breaking the fiber down, and I'm going to make it easier to pack inside this jar. Some people massage for a really long time. I don't, because I think that the end product is less crunchy. So that's just been my experience. So I always try to just massage enough to where I know that it's going to get, it's easy to put into the jar. It's going to be able to be compact and smushed down. Like when I see a piece like this, I'm just kind of going to, I want to break that in half. It really helps this to fit in here better. All right. So now that I've like massaged this, the next thing to do, we're not ready to put it in the jar yet because we don't know how this tastes. We really want to make sure that we create something delicious here. I mean, this has to taste very, very good. It has to taste good now. That's the secret. And, as you notice, I didn't measure. If you are making a gallon, I will say that the general amount of salt to use is between 3 and 5 tablespoons. I usually settle in at about 4 tablespoons of Celtic sea salt, but I'm using the pink Himalayan sea salt today. And we're just going to taste a piece. And as you taste it, just notice, is it like, do you want more? It's really that concept. I always think of a Lay's potato chip. It's so delicious you can't have just one. Like that concept that like this isn't salty enough right now. I'm like, it's all right, whatever. But like salt, the right amount of salt will make us want to taste more. It makes us want to bring more of that saltiness back into our mouths. So I'm going to add a little bit more there. I just sprinkled it on, and I'm doing this on purpose because I want you to be able to do this with your kids. I want you to be able to do this at home without a recipe and see that this is the process for building up delicious sauerkraut. It's really, really easy. And if you learn the basics in this way, it's going to change the way you approach this. You don't have to be intimidated by by a recipe or by like not having all the ingredients. You get to build it. This has been experimented with for thousands of years. People have been making all different kinds depending on what they had on hand. And that's what we're going to do here today. All right, I'm going to taste it again. See, that's better. See, it's like I know when it's right because I'll keep tasting it. I'm like, let me taste another one. Let me taste another one. That's when you know it's salty. But I'm actually going to add just a pinch more, like really, literally not much more, because it's a little bit bigger batch here. And so even if it tastes even a pinch more. So even as you put this into the jar, it tastes really salty right now. Guess what? It's not going to taste as salty when it comes out because all the moisture is going to come out of these vegetables and it's going to totally dilute that saltiness. Okay, so don't worry about that. All right, yummy, yummy, yummy. This is such a good recipe. I can like smell the grapefruit. You don't really taste it per se. Oh yeah, there we go. But it adds just this extra little oomph. So this jar is called the Pickle It. Now the Pickle It has a really cool feature. It has a hole in the glass lid, and I love this. But you can also just use a regular mason jar. You could use, a small little pint jar or a quart-size jar. I generally recommend using at least a quart when you're using mason jars because there's going to be a layer on top. If you're not using an airlock, there's going to be a layer on top that gets discolored from oxidation, and you're going to have to scrape that part off and get rid of it anyway. So given that that's the case, you're going to want to really consider doing a bigger batch, because if you just do it in a pint jar and it all, like you have like an inch goes bad, you're only going to have like just a few bites of sauerkraut in there. All right, now for the fun part. So we're pushing this in, and now you really want to smash all the air bubbles. Don't fill this full and then try to smash all the air bubbles out at that point. No, you want to like put a few handfuls in and then smash it down a little at a time. We're going to pack as much in here as we can. And what we're doing is like by getting rid of these air bubbles, we're actually creating the anaerobic environment, and we're allowing these bacteria to grow. So the first bacteria that come out and start growing and doing their thing, they're called Leuconostoc mesenteroides. And that first strain of bacteria, you know, they come in there and they party and they do their thing and produce lactic acid and help turn this into a stable ferment. But then once they get like, they like acid, but they don't love it. Like it gets to a certain point where it gets too acidic for them and they kind of chill out. They don't keep replicating as quickly. And so then the lactobacillus come in and they start doing their thing. And the lactobacillus are the ones that we really want. You know, there's a lot of different considerations. Like when does it have the highest amount of probiotics? Like I think that's a really important question. I get it a lot actually. And we don't know because it all depends on the temperature where you're fermenting this. And it depends on how much salt you added. I mean, there's so many factors here because salt inhibits the growth just a tad, but it also mostly inhibits the growth of the pathogenic organisms. And the salt makes it crunchy. If you don't add salt, it's not going to be crunchy. It gets really soft because a different kind of bacteria starts growing. That's not bad for you, but that different kind of bacteria is going to make it's going to eat the fiber really quickly and make it soft and I think kind of gross. Okay. All right, I'm liking this. I'm liking it. I think it looks good. Okay, boom. All right, let me go give my hands a rinse. I'll be right back and I will talk to you about what's next. All right, so let's get this clean. There we go. All right, so next up, I'm going to wipe the edges here. And my goal is to just make sure that the top layer here is flat. Right now, there's a few pieces sticking up. So I'm just gonna sit in here with my fingers and try to manipulate every piece of vegetable matter under the brine. And over the next few hours, this brine is going to continue to rise. So every day or so, I'm going to, you know, open it up, dip my hands in here and push it down a little bit. Or you can use something, they make various weights called pickle pebbles. And you can use a little glass weight to put in here as well. There's just all sorts of things you can use. There's all sorts of gadgets for fermentation. I personally like the one with the airlock because it just prevents it from molding. And it really ensures that your batch is going to go well. And it works great for people like me who forget about taking care of all of their little pets growing in the pantry. So when I get really busy, I kind of forget about it for a couple of days. And so if I forget about it, it's going to be fine when there's an airlock. The ones without an airlock, you have to make sure you're looking at them a little bit more closely. Also notice that I left headspace. So there is, you know, just this little bit of space here, probably about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches of headspace. And so what that does is it makes it, it gives it room to boil. Ferment means to boil. And so it's giving it room for this to move around, and all those carbon dioxide bubbles are just going to displace the vegetables and push it up. And we don't want it to like grow out of your jar. Like after the first week is usually the most active, and it will bubble, 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 and it can even push up out of the jar. We don't want that to happen, so we leave that headspace. It's a very important part of it. All right, so next, I'm gonna go ahead with my Pickle It and shut the lid and take out the little rubber stopper. This is for the end. This is what I'm gonna use When I'm done fermenting, it tastes perfect. It's just sour enough, and I want to put it in the fridge. I'm going to take this out, put this back in. So right now, since we're going to start the fermentation process, I'm going to go ahead and put in this airlock. This is just like the kind that they use in brewing beer. And you don't need a little funnel. I'm just being, I like to use all my gadgets. So I'm going to fill this up with water. Not too much, not all the way full. Actually, I think I just did too much, even though I was trying to be fancy. So let me pour out just a hair. There we go. That's better. All right. There we go. We put this in here. And this airlock allows carbon dioxide to escape, but it doesn't allow oxygen in. And the oxygen is what causes the discoloration on top. It's what allows mold to grow. And so this is just like a really fail-proof way to make fermented veggies. Now, let's talk about what happens if you were using a jar. Let's say that you filled up a jar like this or a quart jar and you don't have an airlock. It's really not a problem. That's how I made it for a really long time. So what you want to do at that point is you keep your headspace. Make sure you have like 1.5 to 2 inches of headspace. Push it down, get it all under the brine. And then you can either put like a plastic bag over the top, or even a cloth. I mean, you want to use a fresh piece of cloth if you're using cloth. You can also get a jar that fits inside of it, that fits perfectly, and you find a jar that fits just perfectly, and you fill it with water, and you can set it down in and use that as the weight. And then if you're keeping that vegetable matter submerged under the water, you don't have to like keep it in an airlock. That's the natural airlock. That's how people did it a long time ago. They didn't use this kind of stuff. And then you can cover it with some sort of like plastic or cover it with a clean piece of fabric. And that will just prevent any flies or anything from getting in it. You want to keep the bugs out, so that's really important. But yeah, finding another little jar that fits right inside is such a great way to do this, because when you put that jar in there, it's going to weight it down. It's going to keep the bubbling up process from happening. And then also, as it's fermenting, every day you can kind of push it down slowly and get all that carbon dioxide to come up to prevent any air pockets from forming. Very, very cool. All right, so we're going to let this go for... I'm gonna say I'll probably put this in the fridge maybe at like 2.5 weeks, but I'll keep you guys updated and I'll keep showing you how this little guy is doing. I actually might just do this one without caraway seeds, and then I'm gonna do the other batch with caraway off camera. So I hope you enjoyed this process. Please let me just take a moment to answer questions. But I mean, for those of you who want to head out, I just want to say, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for you to learn this process. And please comment below. Let me know exactly what you're going to be fermenting, what you're thinking about, or any questions that you have or suggestions for future videos. All right, thanks everyone. All right, let's look at some of the questions that we have, because we've got Instagram, we have Facebook. Hi, everyone. Oh, hi. Adriana, Ellen. Yes, Ellen, it will play later. Yay, somebody's making sauerkraut today. That's awesome. Michael says, why don't you eat Granny Smith apples? Do you react to them? No, they're just so sour. I like a good sweet sour balance in my apple, so I just don't end up buying them. Yeah, and any of these ingredients, if you don't like them, you can just leave them out. So I think that's really cool. My kitchen is not overly warm. Will fermenting be a slower process? Well, yeah, a little bit, but it just depends. I mean, my kitchen isn't overly warm either, so I think it's fine. Just taste it every day until it gets to the right amount of sourness for you. Michael says, I love the way you go about making ferments. It's so intuitive. That's how I live my life, Michael. Kia says, how much brine should be on top? Well, just as long as the vegetables are covered. So right now you can see it's not totally covered, but over the next few hours, it will be, I mean, you want even just like a centimeter above it or a 1/2 inch would be fine. And it's even better if you can get more brine. I mean, quite honestly, if you don't have a lot of brine and you're, if you don't have a lot of brine, you may actually want to add a little bit of salt water to it at the very beginning, but you don't want to do that later. So if it's dry and after a few hours, it's still not covering it, I would suggest maybe making probably like a 3.5% salt water solution. And then you can pour that on top and get it to about 1 inch above. Let's see. The airlock does not look screwed or capped tight. Is there a reason for this? Well, because the airlock is, I could leave this off, right? Well, no, I couldn't leave that off. Sorry. The water inside here is that actually what's creating the airlock. Like pushing this down isn't going to make any difference. And I know from experience that some of this water evaporates anyway. I could pour a little bit more out and kind of show you. So there, that now it's tight, but that doesn't matter. Like that doesn't make it any different. So what's happening is there's that tube in the middle, and that's where the air is bubbling out. So it has to bubble out the center tube. It has to go down through the water, like into the water, and bubble out the water on the other side. So oxygen can't get in because oxygen can't travel that way. There's no way to push it in. But this has this loose quality to it because if the pressure builds up, it will push it up and burp it basically, and it will allow that carbon dioxide to escape. Great question. Can I ferment root vegetables such as celeriac and swede? I don't know what swede is. I'll do a brine tutorial next. So that one is coming. I think that would be a fantastic idea. So I'll make sure I do a brine tutorial, teach you guys how to make brine. And I could do one like celeriac. I love doing celeriac and various other ferments like that. So we'll do that. I mean, there's a lot to ferment, right? Okay, let's look at some more questions. Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many questions. Okay. All right, give me a minute here. How much salt is the right amount? It's a flavor. For me, it's a flavor thing, and I've learned that with experience. That as long as it's salty, like deliciously salty, it's a little saltier than it's a lot saltier than how you would salt most food. That's when you know that you've done it right. Going to make kraut today for the first time. So happy to have this visual. Great. I can't wait to see it. Please tag me. The best place to tag me is on Instagram @Fermentationist. So if you're going to make this, please share it with me @Fermentationist. Celtic sea salt. Let's see here. Perfect. People are sharing this with their friends and telling them to make this with their kids. I think that would be amazing. I made it with my 3-year-old nephew the other day, and he did almost the entire process. All I did was chop the cabbage. That's the only part I did. He did everything else. Do you like to make kimchi? Yes, I'm going to make kimchi very soon. I have all the ingredients and I'm ready. Twyla, a gallon-sized jar is not too big. I don't recommend smaller batches. Larger batches generally work better, but I just want to make sure that you know what you're doing. It's always good to start with the smaller batches and kind of see if you can do it. We love fermenting. Just cut up 24 pounds of cabbage last week. Have 2 crocks full. Also kombucha this morning. Yay! Okay, cool. So swede is a UK names for round root veggies. Yeah. Those can be used. Brine video sounds like that's what people want. What takes purple out of your hands from purple cabbage? I don't know. Could you try baking soda? Because I know that it reacts to alkalinity, but maybe it would just make your hands turn blue instead of purple. That's a really good question. I actually don't know. Maybe try vinegar and baking soda. Try the bases and the acids, and and maybe alternate and see what happens. Somebody said my cabbage is older. I have to remove moldy outer leaves. Is it okay to use for kraut? Yeah, it's fine. Just remove all the outer leaves, chop everything off that doesn't belong, that you don't want to ferment, and then give it a rinse, and then chop it up and put it in your sauerkraut. That would definitely work. Yeah, somebody else said vinegar and baking soda for the leaves too. All right. Excellent. So I think I understand what you guys want next time. It sounds like a brine tutorial. It sounds like a kimchi tutorial. So I will keep it going. I'm so excited that you guys are here. This has been a really fun process. And I mean, with your help and your support, now I have my own sauerkraut ready to go. All right. See you guys soon.